Welcome to this episode of Jeff's Journey. I don't know which episode we're on. I think I'm in the 80s, which is kind of insane to think about. Lots of interesting stuff to cover. Quite interesting stuff. I do believe I'm going to bounce around quite a bit. But I want to hit on the health stuff first. And it's interesting because I'm right in the middle of an experiment. So I'm on day 7 of drinking 1 glass of raw cow milk colostrum a day. And the first 3 days were bad. My body had a really hard time adjusting to it. And then it started to ease up. I'm still having some digestive issues. I'm having a bunch of interesting and odd things. Now, this is coming off of, I ate poorly over Thanksgiving to Christmas period. And then when I went back to eating mostly meat, my body had to re-go through the adjustment period, which is not fun at all. But, so I essentially got sick for 2 days and then felt bad for like a week. But after you go through that, then you start feeling quite a bit better. A bunch of stuff starts to change physiologically. And I started losing body fat percentage, but keeping my same weight, which is very interesting. It means you're building muscle, right? Because you're losing fat. And then on the back of this, then a few weeks later, I was able to get with Mervin, my Amish friend that does the raw goat's milk or raw cow's milk, and trying this colostrum because it's my best bet. It's my best idea to significantly change my health, especially the immune system, and hopefully repair a lot of the digestive system, which the immune system would be working on repairing the digestive system before going for like stem cell therapy in Panama, which is 30 grand cash, and I don't have the money to do that anyways. So this is my best bet right now. I have another lead on another health project, an experiment that I might do in the near future. But this is my best one right now. And it is causing some changes, that's for sure. So there's the 2 adjustment periods, actually. All right, so let's go over the first one. I was switching back over to meat. Is when I was eating more of the fiber, right? Super bad for your digestive system, which is ironic because the health industry says the opposite. And, you know, carbs aren't great for your hormones and all that type of stuff. I had a bunch of weird stuff. My circulation got weird. In that sometimes my feet would turn a little blue, which is not a good sign at all. And then my joints were aching like crazy. I mean, it felt like something was eating my joints, which it kind of is, because you have acid buildup in your joints if you're eating all those carbs and whatnot. That's part of the cycle. It produces a lot of fat and it produces a lot of acid. You know, gout is caused by eating a bunch of sugar. For some reason, people think gout is caused by eating meat when it's actually caused by eating sugar. I don't know how that all came about. But so the acid is eating your joints. And then also I have digestive issues, so that's causing immune issues. So the immune system is attacking the body, right, which is the issue with allergies and autoimmune disorders of all sorts of different types. So a major issue in the world today health-wise. And so your immune system is actually eating your joints. So the acid is eating your joints and the immune system is eating your joints. So it feels like something's eating your joints. It's because it actually is. And it felt like that. And I had these 3 fingers here actually retracted enough. My thumb and my pointer finger and my middle finger on my right hand retracted enough that they jammed themselves, which is insane, right? Like, just like I take them and like smashed them against a wall or something. And, oh yeah, this still says December. I left it up because I just left it up for the picture in the background. I don't actually use this calendar. This is more my background for teaching, right? This painting in this calendar. Now it's January 13th. But those fingers were like that for a couple of days, just like you catch a football in football practice and it slams in your finger and jams it. So I had to grab hold of them and pull them out a number of times over a couple of days before those started getting fixed. And I talked to my chiropractor about it. You know, he said it's possible, but it'd be very unusual for a joint to retract enough to be able to jam itself. But it seems to be what happened when I was readjusting to eating primarily meat. And my digestive system was horrible over that time. And because I was feeling so bad, I started laying on the couch more, natural, and doing the lordosis, where I have the cushion, which I have a 3-inch floaty, like a floaty for a pool, that I cut and then place behind my neck to create the lordotic curve that I don't have and seems to stabilize my neck. Started doing that more, my neck started feeling better. And, you know, it was just recently, not that long ago, that my first adjustment started going well since I did alligator wrestling in the beginning of November. So that's all very interesting. It'll remind me how important working on my lordotic curve is. My heart rate seems to still maintain at a resting heart rate in the 80s. It hasn't gone up to what it, it stayed like over 100 almost constantly, even sleeping for 2 years. And then I got it down into the 80s here, and it seems to basically plateaued there. I'm hoping one of these changes, like this major colostrum program, will drop it again. I think if I had more healing, it might drop it, but not exactly sure. The blood pressure seems to be pretty good. 120/80 is considered ideal. I'm usually right around there, maybe 130/80, 130/90, 130, 120/70, something. It's right in there, so blood pressure is not really an issue, but the feet turning blue for several days in a row at different points was weird, because something was wrong with the circulation there. And obviously I'm having some heart issues with the accelerated heart rate for such a long period of time. Had tinnitus really bad for like one entire day, which is just this weird background ringing in the ears, which is really annoying. And then let's jump forward to the colostrum experiment. 7 days into that. Those first 3 days were really rough on the digestive system especially, and I just felt tired. Like every time I sat down, I'd fall asleep. I'm still sleeping a lot more. Like if I sit on the couch to watch a show, there's like a 50-50 shot that I'm just going to fall asleep. which is fine, right? The sleep's super important, and sleep is a good indicator that there's either something bad going on or some sort of good change, because that requires resources as well. Super important for cleaning out your brain, which is one of my major issues, buildup of toxins in the brain, because the cerebrospinal fluid isn't running correctly because of my deformities on my odontoid in the front of my C2. So that's fine that I've needed to sleep more. I have been gaining some weight fairly rapidly while taking this colostrum. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think I would just have to regulate my intake a little bit. My mood has increased every day, like better. My mood has been as stable as I can ever remember it being over the last couple of days. And that is interesting. I mean, the only major change is taking the colostrum. So I wake up in the morning. I take a shot, I do your normal morning stuff, brush your teeth, stuff like that. I take a shot of iodine. Then I teach for a couple hours. Then I drink a glass of colostrum. And then I do something else, watch some videos, read some stuff, write something for a couple hours. Then I have a bottle of kefir that I drink. And that's what I've been doing, basically, for these 7 days. I've not been recording all of my food and health stuff like I used to in a detailed manner, because it didn't seem to actually be benefiting me, because I know the patterns well enough. That's useful if you're trying to catch patterns, but I basically have the patterns figured out. The only thing I'm experimenting with right now is the colostrum, and I can keep track of that in my head, so I've stopped doing that because I don't think it's useful at this point, at least. And that seems to be working pretty good. I'm drinking a lot of the kefir to help get me wallaby kefir. Not my own made kefir. I do have some goat's milk from the farm, raw goat's milk, but I'm not making that kefir. I'm just drinking it because it tastes so good. So I've been using wallaby kefir, plain wallaby kefir usually. Every now and then a strawberry kefir. My mom really likes the strawberry kefir. It's super good. We buy out the North Muskegon Myers every time they get in wallaby kefir, basically. They get in 6 strawberry, 6 plain. I buy them all if I can, and then they're out for another week, which is funny. I think they're having manufacturing issues trying to keep up with the supply they need for Meyer after they picked them up as a distributor. And I worked out a couple of days ago. Because if you go too long, I can work out once or twice a month now and maintain / increase strength, it seems like. I think once every 2 weeks might be approximating ideal, actually, at this point. But I worked out a couple of days ago because it's been a while since I worked out. But I didn't want to do a full muscular workout because I do it in the middle of this colostrum experiment, and I didn't want to put too much strain on the body. So all I worked out was grip and calves, because those are like your survival muscles, right? If you're going to have some sort of strength, you want it to be in your grip and your calves, because there's nothing to replace those. If some other main muscle groups are getting weak and you're trying to do something physically, you can adjust, right? If you're trying to push them, you can push more with your chest, more with your shoulder. You can, you can change position and try to pull. You can do different things, but if you need your grip and your grip gives out, there's nothing that can really replace it. If you're trying to walk somewhere or jump and your calf muscles can't do it, there's no other way to do it. So those are the two most important generally for survival. And then I would say your back muscles become the next most important thing, along the spine especially. But anyway, so I just worked out grip and calves. And I worked them out pretty hard in a way that I should have experienced DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. I should have experienced muscle soreness right away, and then that continued for a few days. I worked them out good enough. The calves and the forearms are unique in that they're a lot of tendon strength, right? Less muscle strength, more tendon strength. And so you have to, a lot of times, do higher reps. A lot of bodybuilders have a hard time building up nice big calf muscles like they want because they have to be worked out differently than all of the other muscle groups. And it's the same thing with forearms, right? Like a lot of times you'll see rock climbers have these huge forearms, and it's not because they're lifting heavy weights with their forearms, although they're lifting their body. It's because they're using a lot of tension over a long period of time instead of a lot of tension over a short period of time. Anyways, I should have experienced DOMS from that for sure. A lot of soreness, and I experienced none. It was, I experienced almost nothing that day, which was insane because it was a workout that should have taxed the muscles pretty strongly, and I didn't experience almost any soreness from the workout immediately. The next day, nothing, and the next day, nothing, and that's really weird. That has to be from the colostrum. That's really unusual. That's extremely unusual. So that's really interesting. So I think it's adding a lot because your immune system is the same system that repairs your muscles and your tendons and those types of things. So I think the colostrum has increased my immune system a lot. And I think, I was really hesitant about this experiment. I tried it a year ago and didn't go well because it messed up my digestive system too much. But I've been working on using the carnivore stuff and the GAPS diet from Natasha Campbell McBride. I've adapted it quite a bit from her stuff. And I'm not really trying to add in fiber or anything like that. But I'm using the yeast and bacteria to help repair the digestive system, and it seems to be working. My digestive system seems to be getting better. Now, I have thrown all sorts of stuff into disarray with this. My thermal regulation has been really weird. There have been times where it's in the 20s, and I'm driving in my car, and I have a light jacket on. That's what I've been wearing recently, and I can't have the heater on. Like, I'm just too hot. There have been other times I'm in the house, and it's like 67 degrees, and I've got, fully clothed with socks and a long sleeve shirt, sweatshirt. I'm under a blanket on the couch, and I can't get warm. So during the colostrum experiment so far, my thermal regulation has been weird, which is interesting. I'm not exactly sure what to make of that. Maybe hormonal changes is kind of what I can assume. My teeth have been hurting, but not in a bad way. Not like I have an issue with my teeth. My teeth have been hurting like they feel like they're growing. It's like growing pains in my jaws, and all of them. It's not in a specific spot. It's not like I have an issue with one of my teeth. It's like all of my teeth along all of my jaws are kind of sore, like, well, they feel like they're growing. It's a really weird, odd feeling, and that's just been happening over the last couple of days. I have to assume that's exclusively because of the colostrum. And, well, so there's just interesting stuff happening. It's definitely changing stuff. And I'm drinking 1 glass a day. It looks like a gallon is going to last me between 12 and 14 days, actually. A lot longer than I thought, which is cool, because that means in the spring, coming right up here, they're going to be having a bunch of calves, and I can probably get a bunch of it. Now, I don't have a freezer that I can actually put it in right now, which is an issue. I might try to work it out with Mervin, that I buy a bunch of his colostrum and then just keep it in his freezer. We'll see if he's open to that idea. But if I drink a glass of colostrum for 6 months, how much of a difference could that make? I think it might be able to make a huge difference. So there's some prospects here. Now I'm not going to tell Mervin I'm good to go until the end of this experiment, which will probably be another 5 or 6 days. But the way it's going, it seems to be going well. It seems to be improving. And well, we'll see. You know, my skin's all broken out pretty bad, and that's from a hormonal change, so it goes right with the thermal regulation. I'm thinking my body will probably adjust to the colostrum as far as that's concerned. My digestive system seems to be getting better at doing it, so we'll see. And then I have to work on the weight and stuff. It appears that I'm gaining some muscle and some fat, because I'm up to like 20% body fat, which is higher than I want to be for sure. And mid-teens, I think, is really easy to maintain, and I'm really comfortable there. And I'm in the mid-180s for weight now. So, and I calculated it out. If I got down to 170, I would have a fairly defined six-pack at 170, which is the highest weight that I've ever would have had a six-pack at, which is interesting. It's hard to lose fat without losing some muscle too, so that would down-regulate a little bit. But it's amazing how much muscle I am actually keeping on my frame with such an easy workout program, and it seems like colostrum, this fairly high intake of colostrum, is going to up-regulate that. I'm going to have a lot easier time keeping on muscle, which will be interesting to see and experience. All right. Anyways, if I think of anything else on the health stuff, I'll come back to it, but I probably won't. Oh, all the joints are feeling really good and stuff. You know, all the problems I mentioned before I'm doing well with. So I guess I should point out that I still technically do have a headache that's lasted since December of 2015, but I manage it just fine now. In other things, there are all sorts of other stuff on here. Well, one other health thing is that the C1 did not move well for a month or 6 weeks, probably about somewhere in there, after alligator wrestling. And I don't know if it was the plane ride or the alligator wrestling. I'm not actually sure, because it seemed I had a harder time with the plane ride to Colorado from Michigan than I did with the actual alligator wrestling, which is interesting. Very interesting. My students love it. Love the alligator wrestling, most of them. And I keep this picture, which I show them. Like, rah! Alligator. And a lot of them like it. And I have one video, a 36-second video on my phone that I hold up and show them me grabbing an alligator and pulling it out of the water by its tail. A decent sized one, not as big as that other one. That was a 9-footer there. But a lot of the kids love it. I had one kid today, Andy, that I think he's maybe 10, maybe 9, something like that. We read a whole book. I guess we're going to teach it now. I'll talk about that next. We read a whole book, and then we had a decent conversation going through a bunch of structured questions that I asked, and at the end we get to what do you like to do, and we go back and forth with that, like reading, writing, and adventures, and I showed him the alligator stuff. He really liked the picture, so I showed him the video. That's kind of how I do that process. It works pretty good. And after I showed him the video, he thought I was amazing. I mean, a lot of the kids do, which is cool. You know, I had like a 6-year-old girl this morning called me very brave. You're very brave, which was hilarious. But Andy couldn't get off it. It was funny. So we spent like the last 5 minutes of him just saying other animals that I could beat up, which was great because he had a very realistic looking lightsaber, Star Wars lightsaber. Star Wars is huge in China, and it was pretty funny, pretty awesome. He was talking about me catching and killing and eating dinosaurs and all sorts of stuff. That was good. I had my first student a couple of days ago that's named Jeff, and spelled the same way as me, Jeff, which is interesting because it's a very popular name. And I haven't had a student. I mean, I've had over 1,000 students. I just looked recently. I've had like 1,118 through one company, and I've worked for, well, technically I've worked for 3 different companies. And so I've had, ways over 1,000 students. This is my first Jeff ever, which is funny because it's such a popular name, especially, I guess in the United States it's popular. Apparently it's not popular overseas. They do have somewhat of a hard problem pronouncing the double F's sometimes. I mean, kids do in general. It's an odder sound to say Jeff, So that might be it. And then I had, in the same day, I had 2 Elsas, which is funny, from the weird Disney movie, that princess movie, the snow one, Frozen. And I had an Elsa, young girl, 6 to 8-year-old range. Then I had another student. Then I had a different Elsa, and I was wondering if the same one was coming back. I've had a student do that before, very rare. But I had a class with a student, and then later in that day, like an hour or two later, I had another class with the same student. Very funny. But it was not the case here, which was very interesting. And then I had a yo-yo earlier this week. I had an apple earlier this week. And the kid that was named Apple, he's like a 5-year-old boy. He thought it was hilarious that he was named Apple. He was just cracking up. He couldn't get over it. And earlier today, I had a Freya, like the Norse god, right? The Norse goddess, Freya. And this was the 6-year-old girl that called me very brave for the alligator thing. It was pretty funny, which is so interesting. And she was fluent in English. I explained to her that Freya was a Norse goddess, and Jeff actually comes from the Old High Germanic Got, which means God. So technically we both have the names of gods, which is pretty funny. And she didn't seem too impressed by that. She liked the alligator thing better. But I thought it was interesting. What else? I wrote some psychology articles on my own personality. One was called On My Personality. The other one was called A Small Adjustment to On My Personality, I think. And quite a few people liked them. They were very interesting. It was very interesting to try to explore my own psychology like that. I think I went pretty deep. I tried to go pretty deep. It was interesting. I'm not sure about my conclusions therein, but I do have this. I talked about various psychological experiments I was doing in there and such. And this one over here is the working through process, which is from Karen Horney, which she has an unfortunate name. She should have changed that thing. But it's very interesting about resolving inner conflicts, essentially, internal conflicts, and it seemed to work okay. Very uncomfortable process. Very uncomfortable process. Another very uncomfortable process is active imagination, which is from Carl Jung, and that's what these are over here. And you essentially have like fantasy settings that you're trying to resolve. I have no idea what this one is about, right? It's kind of like dreaming while you're awake, essentially, is what it is. And I don't know what that tree thing is about. And then these down here, I drew these, and you can see the little pyramids with little people in various formations on them, and that's me there in the center, and trying to figure out which way to go, what to do, and can't seem to resolve that either. And I'll tell you what, as uncomfortable as these psychological exercises and stuff are, not being able to solve them is extremely uncomfortable over long periods of time. So it's been interesting, but I have not had very good results there. Not the results that I've wanted, at least. Miles, my reading, the student I've been doing reading tutoring with, we are working on making progress. We make some progress with backslide and stuff, but we did have an amazing breakthrough the one day. I keep notes on the classes with him, and this one huge note I wrote on here is very interesting. He's kind of down on his own ability to read, and this was the first time, wow, my handwriting is so sloppy, and I don't know where it is in here, but somewhere he said, well, that was the first day this was a couple of weeks ago, this was December 21st, but this is the first day that he was actively engaged at the end of the lesson, which is interesting. I implemented a reward system trying to incorporate all of the different motivational factors that would be useful, associating me with a good thing by rewarding with a video, but then taking away that video, so that's negative reinforcement, and then adding in timeout time afterwards. That's positive punishment. And I'm using the reading program online called the Magic Ladder, which is great. It's a complete reading program. You don't even need people to teach people how to read anymore. You can use this computer program and this website. And he really started to engage with that lesson. And instead of when he encountered resistance, when he had a hard time with a word, he was able to use the program to work his way through it. It was amazing to see that. And he mentioned that it was the first time in here, I thought I put it in the notes, but he really thought of himself as being able to read, because he was reading with the help of the program. He's figuring out the words and reading, and that was super interesting to see. It was really, yeah, it was interesting, quite touching. And what else? Oh, we had all the holidays. So Christmas was a lot of fun, seeing all the family and everything. I got to play Santa Claus again and confused one kid, which I think is morally quite shady, but you kind of got to go, I don't have any kids. I've had to reconcile myself with doing the bad things that parents want for their kids. I guess is a good way to phrase it, because they're their kids. So, and then the kid will just have to try to, overcome that later. Because the one kid's still not sure if Santa Claus is real or not. I'm like, woo. And I can play into that if that's what the situation calls for, I guess. But I've always been ambivalent on that. I even gave a speech on how it's morally unethical to trick a kid into believing in Santa Claus, and then later try to sell him other similar fuzzy concepts, like the concept of God, after you just got done telling him that you had been lying to him for years about this other fuzzy concept that seems highly related. So I think it's interesting, because they both have a reality, right? The reality of them is very similar to each other, but it's more complex, and I think too complex for most of the adults to understand, which is probably part of the issue of communicating it, and so they can't articulate it to the kid anyways, which is interesting. Judah had his birthday, as Evie did not too long ago too. All their birthdays are quite close together over there, and had to write a letter to him. I kept this one a lot shorter than I did for the one for Evie, and I think I tried to put more punch and impact to it. I put it on the blog, it's on JeffreyAlexanderMartin.com. It's a letter to my nephew in 2035, and it's interesting because I post them on different websites and whatnot too, and they get hundreds of views. I think people are just interested in that attempt to give advice. It's a very weird, interesting thing. And the parties were fun. We had one evening party for him at a restaurant, and then there was a party at his house that was a lot of fun too. The band articles I've been writing for 88.9 Hey Radio have been going really well. I was able to meet up with Bill, the guy that runs and started this radio station, earlier in the week for the first time, and we had a great conversation. That was a lot of fun. And I messaged the bands, right, because I've written 6 articles now for different bands. And after I got done writing the 6th one, I was like, why am I not sending these articles to the bands? Like, what are they going to say? Like, you suck and you are horrible. That's the worst, right? It's basically the worst they can do. So I said, yeah, I'm going to send it to all of them. So I sent it to all of them one day, and I got 4 that gave me feedback. I got 4 that responded. 2 did not respond. I got 4 that responded, and they all liked it. They all thanked me, and 2 of them shared it on their Facebook, and one was just, they loved it. Amongst the Giants, which is a cool Christian rock band, they just loved how it was the most detailed it went. I wanted to see how far I could go. So I took their lyrics and I just dove into them deep and hard. And I've gotten quite a bit of good feedback on that. I've gotten some feedback that's like, this is a little too confusing, this is over my head, that type of thing. But I've gotten a lot of other feedback. They're like, I've never seen anyone go into such depth. It's super interesting to see how deep you can go, which was why I did that. That was the point, to see how far I could take it. And it was a lot of fun. So, and then I got other good feedback from other bands too. It was cool. It was a good idea. It was a good idea to send them out. I recently watched Stargate Atlantis, which is a television show, excellent television show, one of my favorites of all time, and realized that I can't remember anything in it at all. It was a little disturbing, because I've had memory issues. I've had short-term memory issues and long-term memory issues, and I watched that years ago, and it was like a completely new experience watching it because I couldn't remember it. And you won't be able to understand this if you haven't ever had any memory loss. And I mean like serious memory loss. It's a very disturbing feeling, realizing that your memory has been erased. It's so weird. It's so weird. It's like, people can't understand what it's like to have dementia or Alzheimer's. You can understand that it would be disturbing, but you can't actually feel the feelings that they would feel. I do. It's really weird and disturbing and messed up, because it really brings into the issue of like, who are you without your memories, right? Like, what is the value and point of life if you don't have your memories? You'll notice a lot of people's framework for life and meaning of life and this type of thing, as they get to the end of life and they look back over their life. What if you get to the end of your life and 1/3 of people are going to die with Alzheimer's/dementia? 1/3, right? So most of us are going to have serious memory loss when we die. And so you're not going to be at the end of your life looking back over your life, not in any kind of detail, and you're not going to be certain of what's real. That's the weird part, because you're not going to, once you realize that you've lost long-term memories, you're not sure what you've lost. Right? You're not sure if what you've forgotten was important. Maybe it was the most important thing that happened in your life. It might be gone. You might not remember it. It's a really weird feeling on stuff, and it calls into question a lot of that type of thing, I think. If you die with your memories fully intact and you see your death coming, that's kind of the ideal death, I think. But that one's rare. That's for sure. So that was really interesting. It just, because I kind of been ignoring the memory stuff for a long time. One, I can't really mess with it. My brain is functioning well now. My short-term memory is strong. It's probably 8, 9 digits now, and my working memory, which normal I think is 7, 8, and I used to be 9. I used to be a strong 9 digits working memory, and now I'm back to a strong 8, maybe a 9, and sometimes, and that goes a lot with IQ, and my IQ is back up within the top 2% pretty easy now. So I wonder, I might be up in the top 1%, which means you can join a different organization instead of Mensa for the 98th percentile. You can join Intertel for the 99th percentile. But I don't feel like doing another test just to try to join that organization. That doesn't really mean much, if anything, to me anyways. So, but it just brought to the forefront that I've lost some stuff, and I've stopped getting lost on roads I know, because there for quite a while I would get lost. I'd just come to a stop sign I'd been at tons of times in my life, grew up in the area, when, this is a normal spot for me, and just be lost and not sure which way I have to go, not just completely and when you think about like the map in your head, like what cut next to what, I would just have like a black section, like an abyss. Very weird experience, but because I've been driving these roads again, most of those have been filled in. Sometimes they still have some issues, but not too bad. And then, like books, I keep a lot of my books. I keep book lists. I have hundreds. I probably have 1,000 books. I might have 1,000 books at least in this room right now around me. And so it's pretty easy for me to review those, because I underline. I have a certain technique where I go through and I underline the important passages, which means the second time or third time or fourth time or fifth time or whatever time I go through the book, I can go through it very quickly and just read those underlined things. And if something I want to learn more about, I'll read around in that section, but I can go through books I've already gone through quickly. And I've gone over a lot of these same books again because I was having a hard time remembering them. Some of the most important books that I think are the most important, I was having a hard time remembering them. And so I just went over them again. So a lot of that information has been filled back in now that my brain is repairing, which you can grow your brain cells at like 3% a year, something like that. And so it's repairing, and your myelin is a big part of that, which is, right, so Einstein didn't have more gray matter, which are like the neurons themselves. He had more white matter, which is the myelin, which is it's like the insulation of the neural cells. They didn't realize this was important back then, but it's more important than the gray matter, essentially. It's the part you can really change and fix. When a neuron fires, there's glial cells, they're called, floating around. They detect the electrical current, they wrap around that neuron, and then they harden into myelin sheaths, and they wrap and wrap and wrap and wrap. So the more you fire something, the stronger that connection gets. The harder and faster it'll fire, and the less you'll lose to the outside environment of that neuron. And then also you have dendrites on one end and axon terminals on one end. And these will reach out and interconnect with other parts of the brain more and more. So it'll become much more of a connected, stronger, faster, more powerful network. That's how you become more intelligent, learn skills, all this type of stuff. And so a lot of that gets damaged when you have some sort of brain damage. This is often what the damage is. It's not necessarily to the neurons themselves. A lot of times it's to the myelin, which I don't know if that was mine. Maybe. I'm thinking it might have been / probably was, because the information seems to come back to me fairly fast if I can reconnect with it. But how do you know what you need to reconnect with if you can't remember? It's really, right? It's weird. It leads to some weird problems. And this is a lot of the problem with MS, multiple sclerosis. There was a woman that I think was like 26. She was in Europe, I believe. She was a top level, one of the best in the world cellist, I think. All right, so the details are fuzzy. But she lost the ability to play overnight, right? She went from being one of the best in the world one day. She woke up the next morning. She couldn't play anymore. And it was because of this myelin. It was a rare disease of some sort, and it had eroded her myelin that had developed along those neural connections for that skill set. So, bam, the myelin's gone. The neurons are still there, but they fire slow, and they don't fire very fast, and they can't fire very often, and they're not very well insulated, so the signal's not very strong, and you just can't do the thing anymore. So super interesting. I think it's probably the myelin sheaths and the insulation that were my main issue. And so once you fire those again, the information starts to come back because the neuron highways essentially are already developed, right? We just need to repave them. It's essentially the idea. And, you know, road maintenance is quite an issue in Michigan. But my brain seems to be doing better. Been studying a lot of psychology recently. Been reading a super interesting book by Eugene Schwartz called The Brilliance Breakthrough, which is about writing. And he says the current form, right, the normal form of grammar sucks. Throw it away. And then he develops his whole own theory of grammar. He was mostly a copywriter, advertising, sales letter writer, and his stuff is good, and they're all about straightforward communication, right? So no one gets confused and no one gets bored. Otherwise, right, if you're reading an advertisement, as soon as something is wrong, something's confusing, something's boring, boom, you're out of there. I call those the two great sins of writing anyways, confusion or boredom. So sales writers have to be very good at what they're doing, keeping your attention and communicating in a fairly straightforward manner. And his theory of grammar is super interesting, system of grammar. And I like it. He uses different terms. Right? There's 8 major different types of words with nouns, verbs, pronouns, adjectives, adverbs, conjunctions, prepositions, articles. And he doesn't use any of those, which is super interesting. He uses image words and linking words and the different types of image and linking words. Super interesting. I've been reading Ursula Le Guin, and she's a genius. Yeah, so the Earthsea series is what I'm reading. And this is such a psychological, like mythical journey. This is the 3rd book in, and 3 books so far are extremely different from extremely different perspectives. It's super interesting. One of the best writers I've ever read, for sure. And I started reading this. This is insane. I'm not sure if I'm going to actually finish reading this anymore. I'm just a little ways in. Valis by PKD, right? Philip K. Dick. And this book is insane. I think this was near the end of his career. It's insane. And I'm talking serious insane. I've read other insane books. There's The Dice Man by Luke Reinhardt, which is one of the favorite books of Richard Branson, the billionaire. And that was insane. It's about a guy who made all of his decisions by rolling dice, a psychiatrist actually. And super good book. And, you know, Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk, probably don't say his last name correctly, is insane. This one is like a religious version of insanity with psychedelics, and PKD did a bunch of drugs himself. Super interesting. I've never really looked into him, but I started looking into him recently, and he seems like an absolute genius. I watched the show recently, I think it was an Amazon Prime show, called Philip K. Dick's Electric Dreams, and it's based on 10 short stories that he wrote, and that's the name of the book, Philip K. Dick's Electric Dreams. And they're just genius stories. They're science fiction stories, and they're all about this, you know, disturbing stuff, centralization of power and whatnot, and all stuff that has become more and more true ever since he wrote that. So very prophetic, super good stuff. And as long as we are on, as long as we are on stories, this story, There's No Such Thing as a Dragon by Jack Kent. I've been reading this sucker like every other day on average. It's a little kid's book, right? It's super good. It's amazing. It essentially covers the same material that's in this book, Self-Deception Explained by Jordan Peterson and someone else, Aaron Driver Lynn. And this is one of the greatest psychology books ever. I've ever read. I've read a lot of psychology books. It's amazing. It's so insightful. It's hard to take action plans out of it, but it's super insightful. And I believe Jack Kent's book is referenced in there. And this book is just extraordinarily insightful. It's about this boy. It's Billy Bixby. And here, I'll just explain, why it's so good. I'll read it. What the heck. Billy Bixby was rather surprised when he woke up one morning and found a dragon in his room. It was a small dragon, about the size of a kitten. The dragon wagged its tail happily when Billy patted its head. Billy went downstairs to tell his mother. "There's no such thing as a dragon," said Billy's mother, and she said it like she meant it. It's got good art, too. I like the art in it. Billy went back to his room and began to dress. The dragon came close to Billy and wagged its tail. But Billy didn't pat it. If there's no such thing as something, it's silly to pat it on the head. Billy washed his face and hands and went down to breakfast. The dragon went along. It was bigger now, almost the size of a dog. See, I'm realizing the insights in it right now. It's incredible. Billy sat down at the table. The dragon sat down on the table. This sort of thing was not usually permitted, but there wasn't much Billy's mother could do about it. She had already said there was no such thing as a dragon, and if there's no such thing, you can't tell it to get down off the table. So true. Mother made some pancakes for Billy, but the dragon ate them all. Mother made some more, but the dragon ate those too. Mother kept making pancakes until she ran out of batter. Billy only got one of them, but he said that was all he really wanted anyway. That's another huge psychological insight, super interesting. Billy went upstairs to brush his teeth. Mother started clearing the table. The dragon, who was quite as big as Mother by this time, made himself comfortable on the hall rug and went to sleep. By the time Billy came back downstairs, the dragon had grown so much he filled the hall. Billy had to go around by way of the living room to get to where his mother was. "I didn't know dragons grew so fast," said Billy. "There's no such thing as a dragon," said Mother firmly. Here we go, the growing dragon. Cleaning the downstairs took Mother all morning, what with the dragon in the way, and having to climb in and out of windows to get from room to room. You can imagine the art. By noon, the dragon filled the house. Its head hung out the front door, its tail hung out the back, and there wasn't a room in the house that didn't have some part of the dragon in it. More of a dragon than a house at this point. When the dragon awoke from his nap, he was hungry. A bakery truck went by. The smell of fresh bread was more than the dragon could resist. The dragon ran down the street after the bakery truck. The house went along, of course, like the shell on a snail. Dun dun dun, going for a ride. Ride the magic dragon. The mailman was just coming up the path with some mail for the Bixbys when their house rushed past him and headed down the street. He chased the Bixbys' house for a few blocks, but he couldn't catch it. When Mr. Bixby came home for lunch, the first thing he noticed was that the house was gone. Luckily, one of the neighbors was able to tell him which way it went. Dun dun dun. Mr. Bixby got in his car and went looking for the house. He studied all the houses as he drove along. Finally, he saw one that looked familiar. Billy and Mrs. Bixby were waving from an upstairs window. Mr. Bixby climbed over the dragon's head, onto the porch roof, and through the upstairs window. "How did this happen?" Mr. Bixby asked. "It was the dragon," said Billy. "There's no such thing," Mother started to say. "There is a dragon," Billy insisted, "a very big dragon," and Billy patted the dragon on the head. The reunion of the family. The dragon wagged its tail happily. Then, even faster than it had grown, the dragon started getting smaller. Soon, it was kitten size again. I don't mind dragons this size, said Mother. Why did it have to grow so big? I'm not sure, said Billy, but I think it just wanted to be noticed. And so you may have noticed that the dragon is a problem, right? So essentially, you have a problem, and you have an argument from authority, right? The mother says it doesn't exist. You're taking her word as authority, so it's criteria of truth of authority, which is very interesting. And then there's conformity that goes with this, right? So this is called social verification. And essentially, we go from our objective truth, our objective theories. We go through a social verification process. What do you think? What do you think? Do you see this? Do you see it? And then we come to a shared reality, and the shared reality is considered an objective truth. That book just explained all that, which is pretty crazy. And in this case, the social verification led to self-deception, right? So I see this thing, but this other person doesn't see this thing, so maybe this thing doesn't exist, must not exist. So then you ignore it. But a problem, ignored, grows bigger, right? And bigger and bigger, and causes a bunch of other issues, and then you're trying to work around it in various ways. And once you notice it and start to deal with it, the problem can start to go back down and shrink. So all of these ideas of self-deception and social verification for shared reality, argument from authority, and criteria of truth, all contained in that book. It's awesome. It's probably made its way to the top of my favorite kids book of all time. My other favorite kids book of all time is The Tales of Beetle the Bard by J.K. Rowling. Super good. You know, those are the tales from the movies and the books that are the kids' stories, like the Three Brothers and stuff. Super good. I have to look at those more too. I don't think they're as genius as There's No Such Thing as a Dragon, and I don't know if Jack Kent really realized how much genius there was in that book. You know, maybe a lot of subconscious coming through there. Super good though. Going back to writing, I wrote a thing on flat Earth, which I think is the most insightful thing I've ever encountered. Some hubris there, so I'll balance it out next. But on why the flat Earth phenomena has really become a thing, on the psychology of how that comes about. And what did I title the thing? I think I titled it Flat Earth, Truth, and Conspiracies. And I dive into some issues with conspiracy theories and stuff too, and the psychology of those. And I've never seen anyone take the angle that I've taken, and I think it's good. I think it's correct. I think it's insightful. So that's very interesting. Oleg and I are making great progress on the, I guess this isn't the balancing thing. The balancing thing will be next on my writing. Oleg and I are making great progress on Horror Without Borders. He's also started another project, which is From Russia with Horror, right? Like James Bond, From Russia with Love, which those are going to be drupals, which are exactly 100 words in Russian. We practiced, he translated one, I edited it in English, and we also made it come out to exactly 100 words. So we're hoping we can do that with all 100 stories in that. But that's a secondary project. Our primary project is the one I have a story in, which is Horror Without Borders, which I have that story up on our website, jeffreyalexandermartin.com. If you go to A Flash of Horror, Part 4 contains the entire story. That series, that Flash of Horror series, is me working out the story, trying to provide insights into that. Super interesting. I wrote my first major political article recently, too, and it was about the political spectrum, about how the left-right idea that we currently use doesn't make any sense at all, and I've gotten some good feedback on that. I have a friend, Casey, that he shared it in a group on Facebook called the Intellectual Dark Web, which is not exactly what the name means, but I don't want to explain that right now. It's just a certain group of people that don't have similar ideas at all, but are just willing to discuss ideas, is the basic idea. And named by Eric Weinstein. And Jordan Peterson is a big part of that, one of my favorite psychologists. And it seems like it's generating good discussions, but someone did point out that I didn't really present anything unique in that. And I agree. There isn't really anything unique in that political article. Whereas like with the Flat Earth article, that is a very unique perspective. I think it adds a lot. I think it more than anything else I've ever heard of on the Flat Earth issue. Whereas my political article really doesn't add anything new almost at all. It just kind of clarifies some things. Is the basic idea there. So, you know, I have different levels of insight on the different subjects, and that's one of them. I've been studying Joseph Campbell a lot recently, which is probably the most knowledgeable person about mythology in all of human history. You know, he's dead now, but he was, and he left a ton of lectures and TV shows and interviews and books and a lot of different stuff. I've really been diving into his stuff. It's amazing. I think it might be one of the major issues I have, right? It's kind of like the active imagination stuff, where those pictures I showed earlier, where you're trying to resolve these imaginary scenarios and the problems that your brain is presenting in dreams. A lot of times dreams are these problems your brain is presenting and it's trying to solve. Well, one of the purposes of mythology is to align your consciousness with the world, right? To structure your consciousness in a way that works with the world. And that's why different cultures have different mythologies, because the needs for mythology of that culture are different. Like hunter tribes they have a lot different mythology. All the hunter tribes have very similar mythologies, but they're a lot different than the agrarian tribes, right? Or the plant-eating tribes primarily. Grabbing bananas is a lot different than hunting a deer. And so, but all these more plant-based tribes have very similar mythologies, and all these meat-based tribes have very similar mythologies. But those two are quite separate from each other. And so there's interesting patterns like that. And I think that might be some of what I'm missing, and I think there might be something deeper here too. Because there is a huge correlation between people with high IQs and an inability to live up to the potential that the IQ should offer, which is interesting. But I think it might be, so IQ is your measurement of how quickly you can determine patterns in information, right? That's IQ. So if you can determine patterns in information quickly, if you have a limited set of information, bam, you figure out faster than everyone else, you have an advantage, you're ahead. If there's an infinite amount of information like there is in the world today, you just end up confused, right? Because you're taking in more information than other people. You're sorting that information faster than other people, but you can't actually get it sorted. So let's say someone with a lower IQ, they take a certain set of information and they take maybe a pattern that's just given to them. They don't try to work out necessarily their own pattern. They don't try to absorb a bunch of more information. They're probably going to succeed a lot better at things with that. They're going to adjust their consciousness to the world a lot better with that than trying to work out your own pattern in an infinite possibility of information. It's because it's an impossible task. So that makes a lot of sense. I haven't heard anyone say exactly what I said there at the end, but I think that wraps into it nicely. And so I have to develop a structured mythology, essentially, to structure my consciousness and reconcile it with the world, which I don't have, right? I started reading tons of disparate books at a really young age, and so I can see the world from a bunch of different perspectives, but I don't have a perspective that I necessarily see it from. Now, I've been trying to develop that over the last couple of years, and I think that naturally happens. That's why I can put out these political articles and these religious articles that I've put out and all this different stuff, because I do have a perspective, but I'm not very good at holding a very certain perspective. I have a lot of doubt about a lot of things. I can see a lot of other angles, a lot of other views, but that's not necessarily the best, which is interesting. It's good for like peace, but not necessarily the best for achieving certain goals that you've laid out, that type of thing. Or even having goals, right? Because you have to be certain to have a goal about what you want and how to get there, the means to achieve it. So that all goes together. It's super interesting. It's restructuring my thinking a little bit about those subjects. So I'm working on that. All right, let's see. That's my weird notes, not very organized notes. But I think we've covered a lot of stuff. We have covered a lot of stuff today. There was a lot of stuff to cover, a lot of interesting stuff to cover. So I feel pretty good about that discussion. I'm curious if anyone watched this to the end. Some people do. I get some numbers that watch my videos. I've had a few family and friends tell me that they watch my videos and stuff like this. I think it's super interesting. It'd be super interesting. I have so much content now. I don't know if it'll really be very feasible when I get old. We were talking about memory earlier. And that's why I started these, when I realized I was losing my memory. And when I get old, it'd be super interesting to look back on these. And I'm kind of hoping I have the opportunity, because especially if it's like your myelin that's breaking down and not the neurons themselves, if you can refire that neuron, then you'll start the process, and as long as your brain is, somewhat healthy, you'll restart the process of re-insulating the thing, reactivating it. And it'd just be super interesting. It'd be cool. I'm hoping that idea works out in the future. A couple of decades from now, I can look back at these videos and it'd be interesting. So we will see. We will see. Anyways, until next time, this is Jeff signing off.